One of the deadliest weekends in Formula One history unfolded decades ago. Yet almost no one talks about it. When tragedy is brought up in F1 circles, the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix is the first to surface. It was dramatic, recent, and unforgettable. But long before that, in a different era of the sport, the 1960 Belgian Grand Prix witnessed a catastrophe just as severe. Time, however, has quietly pushed it into the shadows. How could a single Grand Prix lead to 2 driver deaths and still fade from memory for so many fans? And what made that particular race so exceptionally dangerous? The explanation lies in a brutal mix of outdated track layout, shocking speeds, and a motorsport culture still decades away from prioritizing safety. Spa-Francorchamps in 1960 wasn't just fast. It was a lethal maze of blind corners, tree-lined straights, and zero room for mistakes. It was a circuit built for legends, but tragically, it cost 2 of them their lives. Modern Spa-Francorchamps is already a challenge. But the original layout, used before 1979, was on an entirely different level. Measuring 14.1 kilometers, 8.76 miles, it was almost twice as long as today's configuration and made up almost entirely of public roads. The circuit linked small Belgian villages like Francorchamps, Malmedy, Bournonville, Masta, Stavelot, and La Source, creating a high-speed triangle carved through forested hills and rural farmland. This was no closed, purpose-built racetrack. Drivers raced past stone walls, drainage ditches, telegraph poles, and barns, often just inches from the racing line. There were no gravel traps, no tire walls, and virtually no runoff areas. A single mistake meant sliding across wet grass or slamming into a tree, a farmhouse, or worse. The slightest miscalculation was punished instantly and violently. The old Spa was also incredibly fast. Average lap speeds exceeded 240 kilometers per hour, 150 miles per hour, with some sections, like the infamous Masta Kink, approached at well over 270 kilometers per hour. This narrow, high-speed chicane was bordered by stone houses and barely offered room for 2 cars side by side. Bravery was essential, and survival required precision. Practice began unusually late, at 5:30 p.m. Innes, Ireland, piloting his Lotus, set the fastest time of the session with a lap of 3 minutes and 55 seconds, averaging an astonishing 137 miles per hour. These speeds were nearly unheard of outside of the Indianapolis 500, and on a circuit as unforgiving as Spa, they were terrifying. But the danger soon became real. During Saturday's final practice, silence fell over the pit lane as word trickled in, slowly and inconsistently, of a serious crash. Without radio communication or live tracking, information came directly from the drivers themselves, who would stop at the scene, assess the situation, and return to the pits to report what they'd seen. This old-fashioned chain of communication created chaos as 2 separate accidents occurred almost simultaneously, leading to immense confusion. The first involved Stirling, one of the sport's biggest stars. While approaching the fearsome downhill sweep at Bournonville at over 130 miles per hour, his left rear stub axle snapped, just as he hit a bump. The failure caused him to lose control violently. His Lotus struck an earthen bank, launched into the air, and threw Moss onto the track surface. Incredibly, he survived, suffering a broken nose, back injuries, and fractures in both legs. At nearly the same moment, on the opposite end of the circuit at La Carrière, Michael Taylor's Lotus suffered a catastrophic steering column failure. He left the track at high speed and slammed into a wooded area, colliding with several trees. Like Moss, Taylor was fortunate to survive, though he sustained a broken collarbone, fractured ribs, and a serious neck injury. 2 near-fatal crashes in the same afternoon, and the weekend had only just begun. Sunday arrived with tension thick in the air. Despite the prior day's dramatic crashes, the race went ahead as planned. The field, down to 17 entries after multiple withdrawals, roared into La Source nearly side by side. Despite the danger, the opening laps were described as breathtaking. The cars remained tightly bunched, nose to tail through the treacherous high-speed sections of Eau Rouge, Bournonville, and the Masta Straight. Jack Brabham, having started from pole in his Cooper Climax, led the pack, but the action behind was relentless. By lap 2, Innes Ireland, who had started 8th, pulled off a daring overtake on Phil Hill to take 4th. Just 2 laps later, Hill responded with one of the most aggressive laps of the race, overtaking 3 competitors in rapid succession to surge into 2nd place. His Ferrari was running strong, and by lap 6, he was right on Brabham's tail, preparing to challenge for the lead. The first laps of the race promised a fierce and competitive Grand Prix, filled with high-speed maneuvers and calculated risks. But behind the spectacle, the haunting reality lingered. The circuit's dangers had not gone away, and the worst was yet to come. By lap 19, the intensity of the midfield battle reached its peak. Chris Bristow, a rising British star driving for Yeoman Credit Racing, found himself locked in a fierce duel with a Ferrari. Just inches separated the two as they blasted through Eau Rouge and Radillon, the cars dancing on the edge of adhesion as they climbed the hill and surged toward the high-speed Bournonville corner. It was there, at one of the most unforgiving parts of the circuit, that Bristow lost control. His Cooper careened off the track at over 200 kilometers per hour. The car, with no cockpit safety features or restraints, offered no protection. Bristow was ejected violently and thrown across the narrow grass verge. But unlike Stirling Moss a day earlier, he wasn't lucky. His body struck a barbed wire fence lining the edge of the road. The impact was fatal and gruesome. His injuries were so severe that marshals and fellow drivers were left shaken. Years later, Ken Gregory, who managed Bristow's team, reflected on the young man's raw pace and perilous fearlessness. "He was bloody quick," Gregory said. "Another couple of years and people would have seen just how great he was." Chris had the instincts of a future champion, but like many drivers of that era, his brilliance came before experience, at a time when inexperience often meant death. Only 6 laps after Chris Bristow's fatal accident, Spa-Francorchamps witnessed a second horrifying tragedy. Alan Stacey, Jim Clark's teammate at Lotus and another promising British driver, was nearing the fast right-hand kink just before Bournonville. Traveling at over 220 kilometers per hour, Stacey suddenly veered off course in what, at first, appeared to be a mechanical failure or driver error. Eyewitnesses from the nearby hillside, however, reported a bizarre and chilling twist. A bird had flown directly into his face at full speed. In an era when drivers wore only open-face helmets and minimal protective gear, the impact shattered his visor. Whether he was momentarily blinded or instantly knocked unconscious is unknown. But he was helpless. The Lotus 18 veered straight into a low embankment, launched into the air, then flipped violently. The car cartwheeled across the narrow road before tumbling down the slope beyond the circuit. Upon impact at the bottom of the hill, the fuel tank ruptured and ignited. The Lotus was immediately engulfed in flames. Stacey, still trapped inside the twisted remains of the car, stood no chance. Alan Stacey was born in Broomfield, Essex, and from an early age showed remarkable talent behind the wheel. But what set him apart wasn't just his speed. It was his resilience. At the age of 17, a motorcycle accident cost him the lower part of his right leg. Most would have given up on racing dreams after that. Not Stacey. He learned to drive with an artificial limb, adapting his body and technique to control high-powered machines most wouldn't dare to touch. Despite his disability, he carved out an impressive sports car career. He was especially dominant at Brands Hatch, where his smooth style and mechanical sympathy earned him numerous victories. But in Formula One, he lacked the fine throttle control you need. That was his flaw. With the cars becoming ever more powerful and twitchy, the delay caused by him needing to shift his hips to apply throttle might have kept him from reaching his full potential in F1. Still, few doubted his skill or his courage. But now, the juxtaposition of their deaths was brutal. Just a few minutes earlier, Bristow had been flung to his death barely a few hundred meters away. Now, Stacey's charred wreckage smoldered on the opposite side of the circuit. Between them, they had just 9 Formula One starts. 2 promising lives, extinguished within the span of 6 laps, on the same stretch of road. And yet, the race continued. Despite the shocking tragedies unfolding on the track, the Formula One race pressed on, a stark reminder of the era's perilous nature. Jack Brabham went on to take victory, securing a win that would become part of his legendary career. Brabham's triumph was not just significant for the points earned. It also marked the fastest ever lap at Spa at the time, a testament to the immense speed and danger of the circuit. However, it was a hollow victory, overshadowed by the death of 2 young men. Of the 17 drivers who started that harrowing race, only 6 finished. The other cars were forced to retire, either from accidents or mechanical failures, as the track took its toll on both man and machine. The 1960 Belgian Grand Prix remains one of the most tragic events in Formula One history, and Spa-Francorchamps solidified its reputation as one of the most grueling, unforgiving, and dangerous circuits in motorsport.